the Nile River. Flowing for over 6,650 kilometers, it is a ribbon of life across a parched land. For ancient Egyptians, the Nile was more than just a river. It was the lifeblood of their civilization. From its fertile banks rose a culture that would marvel the world. The Nile dictated the rhythm of life in ancient Egypt. Its annual floods brought water and fertile silt to the land. This allowed the Egyptians to grow crops in the otherwise arid environment. Without the Nile, there would be no Egypt as we know it. The river was their lifeline, their provider, and their highway. It shaped their beliefs, their society, and their very destiny. Join me as we journey along this mighty river and explore its profound impact on one of history's greatest civilizations. Each year, the Nile River would swell. Melting snow and rains in the Ethiopian highlands caused the river to overflow its banks. This annual flood was no disaster. Instead, the Egyptians eagerly awaited it. The floodwaters carried a precious gift, silt. This fertile mud, deposited onto the land, turned the Nile Valley into rich farmland. The Egyptians called their land Kemet, meaning black land, after the dark, fertile soil. After the flood receded, the Egyptians would plant their crops. Wheat, barley, flax, and papyrus all thrived in the nutrient-rich soil. The Nile's predictable floods allowed the Egyptians to develop sophisticated irrigation systems. These systems helped them to manage the water and grow even more food. This abundance of food allowed the Egyptian population to grow. It also freed up people to specialize in other crafts and skills. The Nile's generosity was the foundation upon which Egyptian civilization was built. The Nile was more than just a source of food for the Egyptians. It was woven into the very fabric of their daily lives. The river was their highway, connecting villages and cities up and down the land. Egyptians used papyrus reeds from the riverbanks to make boats. They sailed these boats to transport goods, people, and even massive stone blocks for their monuments. The Nile was also a source of fish, a vital part of the Egyptian diet. They used nets and spears to catch fish, adding protein to their meals. The rhythm of the Nile's floods dictated the Egyptian calendar. They divided the year into 3 seasons: Akhet, inundation; Peret, growing; and Shemu, harvest, all based on the river's cycle. Life in ancient Egypt revolved around the Nile, its presence felt in every aspect of their existence. Section 4, Sacred Waters, Religion and the Nile. For the ancient Egyptians, the Nile was not just a natural phenomenon, it was a sacred entity, a god to be revered and feared. They called the river god Hapi, depicted as a benevolent figure with a large belly symbolizing fertility and abundance. Hapi's annual flood was seen as a gift from the gods, ensuring life and prosperity. Temples were built along the Nile's banks to honor Hapi and other gods associated with the river. Religious ceremonies and offerings were made to ensure a good flood each year. The Egyptians believed that the Nile connected the land of the living with the underworld. The setting sun, disappearing beyond the western desert, was seen as a journey into the afterlife. The Nile, flowing northward, mirrored this journey, reinforcing the connection between the living and the dead. The river held deep spiritual significance for the Egyptians. Its presence was woven into their mythology, rituals, and beliefs about the afterlife. The Nile was the source of life, and in their eyes it held the key to the mysteries of death and beyond. Section 5. A Kingdom United, the Nile and Egyptian Politics. The Nile played a crucial role in uniting the kingdoms of Upper and Lower Egypt. Before unification, these two regions were separate entities, each with its own ruler. The Nile, flowing northwards, naturally linked these two regions. The pharaoh, the ruler of a unified Egypt, was seen as the guarantor of the Nile's flood. It was their responsibility to appease the gods and ensure a bountiful harvest. This gave the pharaoh immense power and legitimacy. Control of the Nile became synonymous with control over Egypt. The river's flow facilitated trade, communication, and the movement of armies. The pharaoh's ability to manage the Nile's resources and maintain order along its banks was crucial to maintaining a united and prosperous kingdom. Section 6. The Nile in mythology, gods, monsters, and creation. The Nile was central to many Egyptian myths and legends. One of the most famous myths tells of the god Osiris and his brother Set. Set, jealous of Osiris's power, killed him and scattered his body parts across Egypt. Osiris's wife, Isis, searched for his remains and with the help of other gods, brought him back to life. The myth of Osiris, linked to themes of death, resurrection, and the Nile's annual cycle, highlighted the river's role in the circle of life. Another creature of myth, the fearsome serpent Apep, was said to lurk in the underworld, trying to swallow the sun god Ra as he traveled through the night. The Nile, in this context, represented the boundary between order and chaos, with the Egyptians relying on their gods to ensure the sun's safe passage each night. These myths, passed down through generations, illustrate the profound impact the Nile had on the Egyptian imagination. The river was woven into their stories, their beliefs, and their understanding of the world around them.